Let's answer to this controversial debate. Some say that renting is like throwing your money away and that you should build equity buying a house instead. Whereas others say that a house is a liability and that you should rent and invest your money to get more wealth. So let's see together the truth. Hi all and welcome to my channel. I'm Nico and I'm an investor since more than 10 years. And on this channel I share my experience to help anyone improve his finances. And one of the most confused topics is this one. Should you buy or rent? And this is actually a question that everyone in his life has to face at some point. And it clearly is one of the most important decisions that you will have to take. And that's why it is super important to know what you're doing with your money. Because a bad choice in this case could cost you millions. And to make it easier for you, I've developed a free tool that you can use to better understand if buying a house it is a good financial decision. But to do that, firstly we have to understand what are the costs of buying a house and renting it, as well as of the opportunity cost, which basically is the money that we could have made by using the money in a different way. And so let's start with the housing costs. Firstly, we have the down payment, which is normally 20% of the value of the house. And after that, you have the monthly mortgage, so the monthly amount of money that you have to pay to the bank for the loan they gave you, to which you have to add the monthly interest for the loan they gave you, which at the moment is of about 7%. And this is clearly super high because in normal we are more around 3-4%. After that, every year you also have to pay the property taxes for the house, which is about 1% of the value of the house. It clearly depends a lot on the country in which you are living, but we can use that as a rough estimation. Then you also have to consider all that is related to maintenance, repairs, insurance, etc. And this normally accounts for 1-2% of the value of the house per year. But clearly, a new house will require less maintenance, whereas an old one will require much more. Finally, when you are buying a house, you also have to pay for the lawyer and also for the buying taxes, which normally accounts for around 5% of the total value of the house. But this is something that you pay only once. And in theory, in the housing costs, or better in the house advantages, we should consider also the tax advantages. However, in practice, it is extremely difficult to qualify for these tax advantages. And because of that, the majority of the people doesn't have access to these tax advantages. Moreover, it is extremely different from country to country. And that's why I'm not taking them into consideration. However, it is also something that in the calculations that we will do, you can compensate for it with a lower maintenance cost. If we go to the renting part, the costs are really straightforward because you just have rent, eventual extras like insurance, and that's it. And so now that we understand the cost, let's see with the tool that I've developed, the opportunity cost. And so if it is better to buy or rent a house. And if you want to use this tool, it is free. You can access it from the link below in the description of the video. Okay, so this is the tool, and let's take as an example a house that costs $500,000. So we enter it there, then the down payment we assume it is 20%, the interest rate of 5%. I don't take 7% because it's too high. It's not the normal price that the normal interest rate that we have. But as you see, it is adaptable, so you can adapt to the situation even in 5 years. The one-off costs, so the lawyer and the buying taxes, we said 5% as an assumption. The annual appreciation, this clearly depends a lot on the area you're buying. I will take now an average 3%. And the annual costs, I will take an average of 1.5%. Now, if we go to the renting section, we can put the rent at 1,500. Again, the rent really depends on where you're buying the house. And so it could be higher or lower. Market returns. So for this, I took the Standard & Poor's 500 average over the last 30 years, which is of 9.8%. Extras, let's say you have $100 per month of extras, and inflation, let's take an average of 3%. So here down we have two graphs that clearly explains the situation. So here on the left we can see that every year how the wealth of both the renter and the buyer is increasing, and here we clearly see that the renter is having much more money in the end than the buyer at 3.9 millions against 1.2 millions. And this difference you can even see it better here on this graph, where the difference just increases and increases more and more over the time. But this is just an example. So for example, if we change some of the assumptions that we have made, for example that the interest rate it is of 3%, what will happen is that the buyer wealth will increase at 1.3 millions, but still the renter will be way ahead. So what happens now if we change the annual appreciation? I won't change the one-off cost because it's one cost over 30 years, so the impact is really minimal. So let's say the annual appreciation now is of 4%. And we see that again the the buyer wealth increased, but in this case it increased much more than before, and this is really interesting. Now also annual costs, let's see if we decrease them, but this is a cost that you can't decrease that much, so it's 1%, let's say. Also this here we can see that there's a big improvement for the buyer, and also we can see from this graph that over the time at some point there is the housing, the wealth of the buyer is close to the one of the renter. Actually it's even higher, but then it goes down and the difference just increases. Why that? This is because of the compound interest effect on the market returns, and this is the great advantage in general for the stock market over many other different types of investment. And so now with these assumptions, let's go again to renting. Let's see with $2,000 what happens as a rent, a monthly rent. We see that in this case the buyer is way ahead with 3.3 millions of wealth after 30 years compared to 2.1 millions for the renter. And finally, if we put back the 1.5k per month for the rent and we put a return of 6%. Also in this case we see that there is a huge impact on the wealth of the renter, which drastically goes down at $864,000. And so you see, with this tool you can just do any type of example, any type of situations of scenario that corresponds more to your situation. But overall what we can say is that the choice mainly depends on 3 parameters and a half, let's say, because the maintenance costs you can reduce them, but you don't have that much margin of maneuver on them. And so the 3 parameters are appreciation, which highly depends on the location, on the area of the house that you're buying. Then there is the market returns, because over the time with the compounding effect of such a high percentage, the renter will always be ahead if he really manages to invest well his money. And then also the rent is extremely important, because clearly increasing the rent it means that you're reducing the money you're investing in the stock market, and so also all this compounding effect will just decrease enormously. And so those are really the parameters which make the difference over buying or renting a house. But clearly this is done in the assumption that you are investing all the money that you would have instead used for the house you are buying. Because if you don't invest, the choice is just a no-brainer. It's better if you buy a house. Clearly, if you have the money, and you will have in the future the money to pay for it. And so overall, this tool can really give you an idea if it is better to buy or rent. But this also is not the only aspect that people use when they're buying a house, because clearly there's also the psychological aspect. We can't just eliminate it. And so it is important to remember that when we are renting, we have the advantage of flexibility and also of availability of money to invest in the stock market. But at the same time, you have the risk that the owner decides to sell the apartment or the house, and so that you have to find another place. As well as you don't have this ownership that allows you to make the house as you want. And if we take buying a house, the advantages are that you're building equity for your future generations. You have a predictable costs over the years. You can build the house as you want, and you also have a sense of stability and accomplishment, which is really important for a lot of people. But on the opposite side, you will require a lot of time and money in order to maintain the house, as well as you will not have the flexibility over the time to just change city, country or whatever. And so in conclusion, my advice is to firstly calculate your potential net worth with the calculator I built. Like this, you can have an idea if buying the house you want is a good financial idea or not. And in the case the two net wealth are similar, you should just look at what you want for yourself in the future, for your family, and this will make the decision much easier. But anyway, if you're interested to know how to invest your money in order to have a return of 10% in the stock market, you should watch this playlist I made. Thank you for watching and see you soon.